Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the DiasporaNEXT fireside chat with Payal Kadakia, the founder of ClassPass and author of LifePass, Drop Your Limits, Rise to Your Potential. My name is Rucha, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Programs and Operations here at Indiaspora. And Indiaspora is a nonprofit organization and is a network of global Indian origin leaders who are committed to inspiring the diaspora to be a force for good. And DiasporaNEXT is actually one of our newer initiatives, and our intent is to engage with the young professional Indian diaspora community through different programming and events that we find really relevant and topical to the young professional community. And yeah, with that, I'll ask DiasporaNEXT chairperson Sejal Hathi to introduce the speakers of today's session.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to see you here. Thanks so much for joining. I am delighted to welcome a visionary and brilliant panel of friends to this virtual event celebrating the work and the leadership principally of Payal Kadakia, the founder of ClassPass, which is the leading fitness and wellness membership brand, which prior to its acquisition just this past year by Mindbody was valued at well over $1 billion. Payal, in all her copious free time, is also the founder and artistic director of the SA dance company, which she founded in 2009 to raise awareness of Indian dance in the mainstream and also foster a platform for expressing the Indian American identity through movement. Payal's first book, LifePass, Drop Your Limits, Rise to Your Potential, was just published and is really an amazing read. I and my fiance have purchased many a copy. It's available for order, and you should definitely purchase it when you can after this event. In addition to Payal, we also have Sheel, Tyle, the founder and CEO of Amplo, a global venture capital firm helping to build companies that matter. Amplo portfolio companies include Robinhood, which works to democratize access to financial services, Parsley Health, which is reinventing functional medicine, and among 35 plus additional companies, Two Chairs, which offers personalized mental health care. He's a member of a smorgasbord of board of directors and is also, in his spare time, a lawyer. And in addition to Sheel, we have Amira Valliani, who I know too as a former classmate at Yale, and she is a venture-backed entrepreneur and currently the policy lead of Solana Foundation, an organization with the purpose of building a fairer, more democratic internet, a topic of increasing urgency and salience in today's world. Amira is also the founder and former CEO of Glow, a creator economy company that builds SaaS tools that help creators monetize their talents and grow their audiences. And previously, she worked in the Obama administration. So we have, as I mentioned, an array of really fascinating voices to share with you today. And I hope that you can learn from their stories, their journeys, and their ideas for a better future. Before we transition to this group, I just also want to note that this is precisely the type of event that Indiaspora and DiasporaNEXT seek to continue to offer all across the country, online and in person. It's one of several events we have already hosted to date, and we hope that and that you will continue to engage and share with us your own ideas for the types of topics that you might like to see featured. And if you want to get involved in any way or have additional suggestions for how we as a platform and as a community should be grappling with the issues of public import today, then we welcome your feedback, your energy, and your talents. So with that, I will pass the baton to my panel, or not my panel, but our panel, Payal, Sheel, and Amira. Thank you again for being here.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having us.
How fun. This is what a lovely conversation. So, Payal, Sheel and I chatted a little briefly before starting today, and he mentioned, you all are good friends. And he said, I kind of want to dig into the ClassPass story because I have a sense of the inside track here. So I'm going to let Sheel kick it off and, start to ask a little bit about the ClassPass story, and I'll come in a little bit later.
Yeah, well, I feel like close friend doesn't even describe it. I feel like Pyle is almost a sister to me. And, I feel like both of us have grown up in some sense in the business world together. Pyle's ahead of me, but, and I feel like I've been able to watch her story and see how it's just transformed a country, frankly, and inspired people all around the world. And so, Pyle, I wanted to start, if you don't mind, with the early days, the days when it wasn't even called ClassPass, when it was called Classtivity. Maybe just take everybody through the journey of from day one to when it became ClassPass.
Yeah. So the idea, and I always think it's important to start with when the idea came to me, because I was sitting at my desk and, I think you guys mentioned a little bit of my background, but I went to MIT. I was working in consulting. I then took a job in the music industry. I was checking off all the boxes for my parents and, trying to do the responsible thing. But I had a really deep passion in dance, and specifically Indian classical and traditional forms. And I was this girl who, even in the midst of MIT, even in the midst of being at Bain, was trying to keep her dance life alive. And whether that required rehearsals and performances, whatever it took and whatever hours I could muster up to have for it, I gave to it. And I found myself about 6 years after college working and sort of being at this place where honestly, I was pretty uninspired. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I felt I was at a crossroads. I had built my dance company already. So I had done pretty well in New York City. And I just knew that I needed to find something that was going to bring all parts of me together. And I think we can go deeper into that because I think my Indian American identity has a big part of that as well. But really the idea came to me because I was sitting at my desk and I was studying ballet at the time. And to really train in any form of dance in general, you really need to keep going to class every single day. And so I went to go look for a new class that day and I was miserably frustrated. And that's when the idea came to me and the product idea came to me. And what was really important for me was to be signing up to solve a problem in the world that I knew could help others. And here I was, this, girl in my mid-20s who had fought to keep dance in my life. And I knew I looked around and saw so many people in the corporate world who had given up on their passions in their life. And it had felt like something only you do when you were younger. And I wanted to be that person to bring back that light to people's lives. And that was really the impetus for all of it. After we launched, or not launched, let's say we started the company, we made a bunch of mistakes like most entrepreneurs do. We spent the first year building this beautiful website. I thought I was going to be the open table of classes. I actually think this is when we met, right? Around this time.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, yeah. And I had raised a lot of capital because people thought this is a great idea. I had a great background. It all made sense until we put it out in the market and no one went to any classes and I had no revenue. Of course, not a business to kind of keep the backing. And that's when I really became an entrepreneur, was really honestly the day I failed. And that's what most people don't always know about the journey is failure is a part of it. And if anything, you need to become very comfortable with it. And I think I have. And, being someone who came from parents who were immigrants, they always want to shield you, right, from anything like failure. And so I kind of went through it my first time when I had started my company. And I'm really glad I did, because I think it set me up to be able to iterate on my product and be able to really find where I wanted to put time and energy of the company. And a lot of the early, I would say the first 3 years of the company was a lot of iteration, a lot of pivoting, a lot of figuring out what was going to work and, just really moving and making those hard decisions.
One of the great things about Indiaspora is the community it brings together of Indian Americans across generations. And one thing I remember about you, Pyle, is in your early days and even now, you have a lot of great mentors, including Indian American mentors. And so Indian or Indian American. So I'm curious, in those early days, who were your mentors? And How did you leverage or engage them as you were building the company?
Yeah, so I think one of the first I would talk about is Anjula, right? Who she at the time was running a company called Desi Hits. She was trying to sort of make Indian culture pop and mainstream in America, and she's now Priyanka Chopra's business manager. But she really, we found each other through a mentor I had at Warner Music Group, and she was just one of those people. I had not seen many Indian women that I could look up to that were doing anything in a diverse field, and especially in something more media tech oriented. And it was really inspiring for me. And she definitely became one of those mentors in my life who pushed me, and to especially as a woman, just didn't let me think that I couldn't do anything I wanted in my life, and to bet on myself. And I think that advice and, continuously throughout my journey has been unbelievably important. And I also really want to, take a moment to say, obviously my parents, my mom, especially, and Usha Auntie, who I talk a lot about, my book, who was my dance teacher. She was just, these people in our lives since we were younger leave a very deep impact on who we are. And, Ushanti taught me how to show up to life. She was my dance teacher, but she was much more than that. And I think, I had sort of built a way of being coached in my life, but also finding a way to be me in my life. And I think that's the magic of mentorship, is not kind of getting sucked into, this is what someone wants me to do, or this is what my advisor told me to do. It's really about, okay, like, here's how I take that advice, and then here's how I collect all that information and move forward. And I have surrounded myself with great people, with different types of people along the journey. And I 100% know that my success is because of the people I've surrounded myself with.
Go ahead, Amira.
I'm muted. I want to cut in on sort of this idea of how to use mentors, because I think it's something that using mentors is a skill that I've really developed over time. I used to get really nervous when I get introduced to these like really badass people who offered to help me. And then I'd think I'd want to set a call with them once a month, and I'd prepare for the call. And it just felt like there was so much weight in there. Right. And I'm curious, tactically, it seems like you actually fell into this pretty early, like you were, or at least from reading your book, it feels like you were able to really engage your mentor. So I'm curious how you think about that. What does the actual day-to-day look like of how to use your mentors? One, just tactically, and two, how to know when to take their advice and then when to filter it out and ignore them.
Yeah, it's a great question. The best mentor relationships, honestly, the best relationships in general that I've had in my life, friendships, anything, they ebb and flow based upon, when it's the time when you need each other, right? And I think there are certain advisors and mentors who were there perfect for me when ClassPass was in early stages. There were other ones who were great when we were in later phases. And there were certain people I talked to every single day for a month, and then I wouldn't talk to them for a year, and then we would talk again. But I think the biggest underscore to all of it is being vulnerable. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to do. Is a mentor is there because they want to help you. So if you show up saying everything is okay, they can't help you with anything. And I think I've learned to ask the right questions and be really authentic and honest, because these people truly want me to succeed. If I'm trying to impress somebody, they're not a mentor, right? That's a very different relationship. They're probably a role model, which is great, but you're not going to get much from that. And they're probably not going to get much from that either, right? And I think that's the important thing I've learned in all of these. It's about the give and the take. What am I getting? And honestly, I've realized, like, mentors, and even being on the other side now too, is they want to feel appreciated. They want to feel that they added value. And it's sometimes, important to also make sure you're telling them that, and saying, here's what I did with the feedback you did give me. And look, there are times you don't listen to, and I think it's okay to say, hey, like, I thought about what you said. My perspective is X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to take a little bit of that, but I'm going in this direction. And it's okay. Like I said, I think the best thing you could do is communicate it and your decision to move forward the way you want to.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy when it comes to mentorship, right? Because you have to be vulnerable and willing to ask them the hard questions. And part of being willing to do that is just feeling confident in yourself. Like, it takes a lot to go to these people and tell them, like, I have no clue what I'm doing, or I totally screwed up the go-to-market strategy. Like, can you help me?
Yeah. And I think starting with those advisors and mentors you could be really yourself with is better than getting one of those people who have the biggest title in the world. I think that's the mistake. A lot of times people make that. They want the person who actually is probably never going to have time for them and never give them that confidence, right? In the earliest days, some of my best conversations were when I would call someone saying, oh my God, I don't know what to do, or, I have to make this decision. And the question they would really ask me is just, what do you think is the right answer? And almost in a way force me to build the confidence in my decision, right? That I already know I want to make. And I think the best mentors, and like I said early on, if you can find those people who you don't feel that uncomfortable with, who you truly can be honest with, I think you will learn how to be more confident. So then you can kind of work your way up the rung, there are mentors I have today, which, oh my God, and people I have in my life that I would have never thought when I started I was ever going to meet or, be so close to. And like I said, it's because I worked my confidence up, I worked my skills up in making sure that, it made sense to now meet those people. And you're at the end of the day, you realize everyone's going through the same thing. I think that's like the big thing, no matter how big somebody is or how much of a big of a company they've built, we're all going through a lot of the same things, especially if it's about anything, personal or mental health or any of those things, like you can talk to anyone about those subjects.
Totally. So I want to ask one additional question about ClassPass and SA, and then Amira, I'll let you transition to LifePass. So my question, Payal, is one thing amongst many that I found so impressive about you throughout the years is while you were running a huge company with many, many employees, you still found a way to dance and to perform. And that was such an important part of your life. And you made it a priority, and you told the board that this is something you were going to do. So just talk to folks about that. How did you do that?
Well, I started the whole company to protect what dance was in my life for other people. How was I not going to stand up and do that as the person who built this company? And, it's funny because Sheel, I remember having conversations about this in the office, you and me, and you even being like, hey, like, I think people don't know like what this dance thing is you're doing. And I was like, I don't care, because it is what is my why for this company. And the second I lose that, I don't even want to be here, and I think we forget that, right? And I think we always think, and believe me, I've been through many places in my life and many times in my life where I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it, and there were periods where I stopped dancing because I didn't know if people were going to judge me or whatever it might be. But I've learned that it's my fire, it's my soul, it's my why. And I would have not ever made the decisions I made in my life if it wasn't for dance, and it's led me in a really great place. So why wouldn't I keep following that and protecting that? And I think, people always ask me what's the worst advice I've ever received, and it was to stop dancing. And
totally,
yeah, and I 100% will back that. And as a founder and as a creative, and at the same time as someone who's built a great business, I think it's so important that we cultivate the creativity in this next generation, especially, right? And I'm a huge proponent of that, and it's stuff I love. I talk a lot about SAW in my book, but I grew up in America during a time when Indian arts was just not yet there, and it's honestly still not there in the world, and it is something we all actually have to work on, or we're really going to not be able to share our culture with the world.
Yeah, and I think it made you a better founder and CEO and board member by being able to express your creativity, by being able to see your customer in some sense, by just being able to also show that you can do more than just run a company. Not that that is a huge task, but that's not just Payal. Payal is not just the founder of ClassPass. She is so much more.
Yeah. And, one of the stories I always love is my Series B investor, Adam Falcon from General Catalyst. He's come to a few of my shows. A lot of my investors have come to my shows, and they would come, or we would go to a conference, and I'd be meeting like the CEO of Sony or the CEO of some crazy huge company. And and I'm like, hi, I'm Payal, I'm the founder of ClassPass. And he's like, hold on, I got to show you a video of her dancing. And he would whip out his phone and go to YouTube and show my like wedding dance or show some SAW video. And it made me realize like he was proud of that too, which is so great. Like, this is an investor who bet on me. And he was like, and he always said this to me, he's like, I knew if you could be that good at that, you could be that good at anything in your life, right? And I do believe in that philosophy of building and cultivating skills in our lives. And I think that's really important.
I love
Well,
it.
it also just made such a good party trick, right? Like everyone knows you as it's something that anyone can ask about when you're like at a lull in conversation. Um, I want to double down asking about these skills that you discovered and built over time, because I read part of the book on you discovering yourself as a salesperson. And in that part of the book, you talk about how you and members of your team would just go take 4 or 5 classes a day just to like get to know fitness owners. So it's a 2-part question. First is, were you in the best shape of your life at that point, taking 5 classes a day?
Yes, but the life of a dancer is not easy. And before shows, I mean, I would perform and practice for 20 hours. So it wasn't like new to my body. And to be honest, what you realize, it's more mental to get through it than it is physical.
I thought that was pretty impressive. Yeah. And it's also like, what a great way to have work-life balance in the middle of starting this huge endeavor.
Well, it was the reason we did it was to actually sell the studios, right? So it was our sales tactic for me or someone from the team to show up. And we would usually like research when the owner was teaching. And so we would take their class, which like, to be honest, like for a teacher, they love their students, right? And then afterwards we would have a conversation with them. And we just realized like it was so much more friendly of a conversation after they had sort of just done this class for us, which, hopefully we did well in. There were definitely times where by the end I was like, what am I doing? And I remember there was one day where I took one of the hardest classes in Manhattan, and it was my 4th or 5th class of the day, and it was a reformer, and I literally thinking I'm gonna fall inside this thing. I just need to get through the next few hours or few minutes of this class, but we made it through. It's all mental.
Yeah, I thought it was so fun as a sales strategy, and it showed so much hustle, right? Early on, you're like, all right, how do we collectively get 25 high quality conversations a day? It's like, let's go hit up every single class teacher that we can. Yeah. But I wanted to double down on that because one of the things that you said was you discovered that sales was a skill that you had naturally, and through that process it really helped you hone it. And so I want you to talk a little bit more about that, your discovery of sales as a skill that you just naturally had. And then so why don't we stop there?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's important for us to realize that, especially skills that we think we never have, right? Like I actually never considered myself to be a salesperson. Like there are people I know who are so good at it. I would have never signed up for that role. But like you said, I think when I was doing something authentic, right, and I really believed in it, it was very easy for me to sell it, right? I even still consider myself an introvert, but I literally consider to be like a mission-based extrovert. Like when I want to pitch you about SAW or a company or anything, I can like talk your head off and literally tell you so much about my passion. And I think that's really what it is. It's when there's passion, you can really convert anyone. And I think like in terms of being a leader and building a team, like even more than obviously getting our salespeople on board, I realized that when you really care, right, and have a deep, authentic why, people want to join you, right? And I think us showing up in our leggings, like sitting there with an iPad after your class and was telling you about this vision we have of building this company to get people to go to class, we weren't showing up in like these big suits, right? We weren't like scary people. We were literally just 2 girls with an idea, and they really wanted to talk to us because they were interested in it.
Can you walk us through one of those conversations, maybe a story when you went to an owner, maybe after that reformer class?
Yeah, I know that's actually the one I was thinking about. I mean, a lot of the times, like they knew we would want to chat for 15 minutes after. So we would email them before and they would know that. And then, so they knew we were coming. And by the way, and like, we didn't, like Sheel said, I mean, we were called Class W. No one knew who the heck we were. And then, most of the people at times everyone would leave and then we would just sit down, usually like on one of the couches in the front of the studio. And we would pull out a slide deck and we would just go through some slides. And, there was no cost to the providers to sign up for us. It was literally purely revenue for them to be a part of the platform. So we'd be like, do you guys want to be on board? And most of the times we had like a 98% closing rate. I remember at the time. And people would be like, yeah, sure. And then we would go home and like send them some onboarding email to get all their information. But it was really fun. Like I almost feel like we made a lot of friends through the process. And man, yeah, like you said, I had to take a lot of classes.
Yeah. Talk about doing things that don't scale, right? Imagine if you took a class with every
I'm glad my team got really good at it. Actually, another funny story is when we were launching London, I brought my husband too, and my fiance at the time. And actually Claire, who Sheel knows too. And there was five of us, and we had to go check out like 30 studios in 4 days. And we were jet lagged, and we all just, even Nick went, my husband, he was just like, because we just had to go and check out studios to see who was there. And anytime we would go, they just felt more friendly if someone from the company showed up. So it was easier to talk to them after, but it was like all feet on the street.
Wow, that's amazing. Even as you were scaling, it was you at the front lines going to London, making it happen.
That was after we had raised over probably $75 million. We were, especially if we were going to a place like London. I mean, we brought our best people, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. I want to dig in a little bit more into the role of ambition, because it's something I really struggle with. I think being Indian American, a lot of us come from families where there's a lot of ambition, and that trickles down into us and how we sort of think about life. And I thought was so interesting about your story is you're figuring out a way to hone your interests in a way that's really ambitious. And I just want to read this quote from the book that I thought was so funny from your Usha Auntie, your dance teacher. And this was when Kamala Harris became vice president of the United States. She said, Payal, something to think about. I'm serious. Please start now. This is when she saw Kamala Harris get inaugurated. This is a text you got.
These are the people I have in my life.
Yeah, and I thought that was so great, because like, who of us didn't like have the inside joke that was like, oh yeah, just vice president. I'm like, come on. Like all this really fun, like, oh, here's an Indian really crushing it. And I wanted to tease out how you think about that, like honing what I'm sure is inherent ambition, which is clear in your resume, with pursuing a passion of yours, because it's hard to find those overlaps between the spaces where you feel like you can pursue dance, but also pursue like a really big, hairy goal. And I'm wondering how you think about that.
At the end of the day, I think this comes back to the question I was even alluding to at Sheel, is what I have learned to do throughout my life is stop splitting myself up into multiple people, right? I wanted to find a way to bring my Indian and American identity together. And that's why I started SA, which combined to me my American dance aesthetic with my Indian dance aesthetic. And to me, ClassPass was a place where I could be my creative movement-oriented person and also my MIT Bain person all together. And I think that's really the key, is to set up and create environments, right, where you bring your full self to the table, right? So it's interesting that you said ambition and passion sort of indifferent. I actually think we need to stop thinking about them as different things and start putting them together and creating new ecosystems. I actually think, because I think a lot of the Indian Americans who came here in pursuit of, obviously, of needing to make money. The general professions we had are very different than the creative passions, right? That I think are obviously apparent to other people and have been cultivated. And I think that's almost put in us a little bit of here's what success looks like, right? And I think we have to still keep working through that. And I think my whole journey was, how do I keep working through that? Because I really love dancing, and no one else seems to think that's a viable profession or a viable path to being ambitious. But I'm going to go and form my own way of using that to create something impactful in the world.
And as you think about, you've had amazing success so far. You've pursued dance all the way through, and you've sold this company that you've built from scratch that I've been a customer of for a long time, and I'm sure many people here have. How do you think about what's next? What's the next step of combining what bringing your whole self to the table, given this journey that you've already had?
I'm figuring it out right now. I think I'm in a really, obviously, lucky position to be in right now, but it's also sometimes daunting because I have every opportunity I could ever have dreamt of right now. But at the end of the day, I have to start with my why. I have to start with everything that is at the heart of it. I think someone even said this, if you find your why, you can enter almost anyhow. I think it's actually David Brooks it was in the David Brooks, The Second Mountain quote. I think Sanjeev just messaged in the chat to everyone, which is such a beautiful quote. And I really think it's really about finding your why, because if you don't have that, then there's nothing else. And to me, that's the key, is about anchoring back in that. There's definitely things I'm really passionate about. One being obviously South Asian arts. I think we haven't created enough of an infrastructure here in the US for South Asian arts. And we come from such a beautiful culture, artistic place. And if we can't really do anything in the US, you end up really not being a part of global culture. And I think it's important that we find a way to put our voices into it, because we're not void of any of that artistic culture and presence. So that's something I'm really passionate about, and I know I will be dancing, but we'll see what happens. And I honestly, my company was sold in October, and I spent all the rest of the time on the book. So I feel like I'm coming to the tail end of the book stuff, so I can finally breathe and think about it, but we'll see. I honestly need to go inward and take a little bit of a sabbatical and a break before I can come out and, get rolling on the next thing.
You deserve a vacation, for sure.
Yeah, it's well deserved. So like, in terms of finding your why, what advice do you have for folks who are on this call right now, who are maybe younger, starting out their journey? How do you think about helping them figure out what their why is?
Yeah, I mean, my whole first chapter, by the way, of my book is surrounded by this. And I think the first question to ask yourself is, and by the way, this is at any age, I don't think it matters how old you are. You can always kind of tap into these things, is what did you enjoy when you were younger? Just purely, right? What did you do before society told you what you can and can't be? What did you truly love to do in your life? And usually there is something, right? When we're sort of pure in our youth, there's stuff that we really enjoy that is important to anchor back to. The second thing I would say is try new things, right? For me, it took me to go to San Francisco to even realize that entrepreneurship was a path I could even entertain. I didn't know anyone who was an entrepreneur in New York City in 2010. So it was an important thing for me to just get out of my current environment into a new one, to realize, wow, like I could do an entire different profession. So I definitely recommend that. And then the third thing I really recommend is honestly finding the silence. It's hard to sometimes do that. And that's honestly where I'm at right now. It's already inside of us, our why. It's not something someone's ever going to tell you what it is. It's not something that, everyone's telling you you're good at. It's about service and purpose, right? At the end of the day, I mean, in India, we talk about dharma a lot. We're already born with it. It is who we are. It's destined to be on earth. It's just a matter of, are you willing to go and allow yourself to hear it and then prioritize it in your life? And that's the other big part of it. And that's the rest of what my book is about prioritizing that once you know what it is.
I'm
How
curious.
do you find? Go ahead.
Sorry,
Sheel.
go ahead, Amira.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, you are an amazing mother of one. What advice would you give to your son today, knowing what you know about the world, building a company, dancing? What advice would you give to your son?
To let him be whatever he wants to be, to really, truly allow him to feel free to pursue whatever career path he really wants to. That's one of my biggest things. And obviously set him up to succeed in it. But, my number one thing is definitely letting him do what his dharma is, right? Your job as a parent is to guide your child, not tell them what to do.
How do you think you do that?
How do you think
it's
you
so
do that?
hard, right? Yeah, like the
Yeah.
voice. I mean, like voices everywhere are guiding us in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to lay that pathway. I'm sure you've thought a lot about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to what environments I want to put him in, right? And also put myself in as a mom, right? And say, okay, where am I taking signals from of how I want to raise my son? And is this the right environment I want to be in and the right environment he wants to be in? I think we forget how much environment truly impacts the way we all behave, right? And like I said, the norms that we think are real. And, something I've always done throughout my life is had different communities that I've gravitated towards, whether it's creative communities, my professional communities, my tech communities. And I've loved having the different opinions of people to sort of guide me, but that lets me form my own opinion. And at the end of the day, it's about not forcing someone. It's about asking them what they truly want. And, of course, like there are responsibilities in life. And I think that's an important thing to teach our kids is what is a responsibility. I talk a lot about that in my book. This isn't about jumping off of a cliff. It's about actually making sure you have the blocks underneath it that are built, right? The foundation and the wings to fly. So you're not just going to fall down when you do that jump, but I don't want to prevent you from jumping, right? And he's 2 years old, so I can't tell you everything, but my hope is that, I don't force him and push him, but I allow him to be who he wants to be.
Yeah, I thought there were a couple of really lovely snippets from your book. One where your dad sat down with you at the kitchen table and like built a spreadsheet with your budget and said, "How long can you go without a salary?" And helped you figure out how to put those building blocks in place. We've got a question from the chat channel. And for those of you who also have questions, feel free to just throw them in there. We're happy to move into audience Q&A now. And the question's from Rucha, and she's asking, how do you know when you have a good idea for a company or product?
So I would rephrase the question. I would say, don't worry about the product. It's really about what problem in the world are you solving, right? And you'll know that it's a good idea when you've solved it, right? And if you could solve it for one person, that's okay. What people forget to think about, it's not about solving it for 10,000. It's about, did I solve it for one person? If you've solved it for one person, try 2 people. If you've done it for 2, try 5. If you've done it for 5, try 10. And that's how you actually build the best companies in the world and the best It's not about being product obsessed. It's about being mission obsessed.
How'd you know you had that for ClassPass? Like, what was the point where you're like, holy shit, I think this is going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely remember that time. I mean, clearly no one was going to class in the beginning, so it was not working. For me, when ClassPass became a subscription, there were, by the way, we only had 150 customers at the time. So I'm not even talking about having, thousands of members. I literally only had 150 customers.
And how far into the life of the business was this? Like, when did you?
3 years, but it was only 3 months into launching the ClassPass version of it, the subscription version. So it was 3 years into all the iterations and the start of the company, but it was only 3 months after we launched the subscription version. And the magic in it was these emails I got in customer service from people saying that this product changed their life, and the way they talked about it, I felt I had truly given them what dance was in my life, in their life. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew we had really hit something that was magical, that was a behavior that could transform the world.
3 years of not feeling like you've hit that point takes a lot of tenacity. Like, that is a lot of banging your head against the wall. What drove you through that, especially in the times you thought you might want to quit, if you ever thought about quitting?
I didn't. I mean, I knew I just had to figure out a new way to do it, right? I still had money. I really think the end day situation is when you run out of money. If I had money, I had another day to fight. I had another day to try something new. And I wanted, in our second product, we started getting people to class, so that felt better. It wasn't the perfect iteration, but I think as long as someone was going to class, and even today, when someone comes up to me and says, "Oh my God, I just went to a ClassPass class," or "I love going to classes on ClassPass," like it brings me so much joy to know that I helped them carve out those hours of their life, because I know without ClassPass, the chances of them doing that were probably 0. And that is the magic that I knew the product had. And honestly, what I wanted to fight for, I knew this would bring so much joy to people. And so it was about, to me, it felt like being in service, right? And being of other people. And I wasn't going to stop. I was doing it for the good of humanity.
So really, in those 3 years, you never thought about quitting? Like, what did you do on the days when no one signed up for class and it just felt awful? Yeah,
I would find another direction to go in, right? Like, I think that's really what it is. It's about moving in a different direction and not getting stuck. There were definitely some hard days. I'm not going to ever deny that. There was a point where my co-founder and I literally, we got maced and mugged sitting at a coffee shop working on our demo day pitch, which was not a fun time in our journey. And, I remember just like questioning everything. But once again, going back to the first question, like, I had great people in my life who pushed me through those moments, right? When I would call them, they wouldn't even ever let me say the words like, "I'm going to quit." They're like, you are meant to do this. And I think that's like a big thing, that reflecting on the journey of the book and the journey of my life right now, there's really, I don't think any other combination of a human being that could have come up with ClassPass, because of, I don't know what other girl was probably, skipping client meetings to go to dance classes, sitting there at Bain, who had an MIT background, right? And I'm not saying that in any way to like have an ego or any of that. I'm literally saying that because I think sometimes those parts of me were what made me uncomfortable and embarrassed, right? But those were the parts of me that truly made me the right person to do this, because I had been literally trying to solve this problem for so long, and I just needed to put my MIT brain and Bain brain into solving this problem for other people.
Yeah, it's such a good example of founder market fit, right? You were put on this earth to make it so that we all had access to these classes.
Exactly.
I'm curious let's say you're an entrepreneur out there or on this call and you're struggling, you're hitting a wall. How do you know whether you should keep persisting with your idea versus pivot into something else?
Do you have product market fit, right? I mean, at the end of the day, does your product work in solving the problem you set out to do, right? If it solves it, great. If it doesn't, you got to try something new, right? And even our second product, which was our passport product, it was this 1 month place where you could go and try a bunch of classes. Yeah, it like checked some of my boxes of the mission, right? Because people were going to class, but I didn't want to change somebody's life for a month. Dance didn't change my life for a month. It changed my life constantly. And so having that frame, this is why I always say you need to have a true north, because you won't know then. You're just going to kind of be like, it's working, or you're going to go to the P&L numbers and fine. Like P&L numbers are reactive, right? Like your customers, your brand, all that stuff happens before it all trickles down to the P&L. And that's the magic of finding a good product and having that virality and all of that is truly knowing that you've been able to measure that you've made an impact. So I think that's really what it comes down to.
We've got another question. You discussed the topic of controlling your own time. Can you explain more about how you do this effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it's your time, period. Why would you not be able to control it, right? I'm just going to start with that. And I think since I was younger, I was always juggling doing well in school with my passion, that I at a very young age had to learn to be very efficient and planned out with my time, or I would lose the thing that most people didn't care that I did, but I wanted to do it. So I had to learn to prioritize it. And I think that training for me lived on throughout my life, right? When I had homework at college or when I had work to do professionally, it was, how do I wake up early on a Saturday morning to get to rehearsal? How do I, what am I saying no to, right? That's the biggest one that most people struggle with, is how do you say no to the things in your life that you think you should do? And the answer is in that. It's don't do the shoulds, and my whole philosophy is run towards your yeses, and you won't have time for the no's. The no's fall off of your plate because your life is set up to doing all the things that you truly love to do. And that's not just professionally, it's personally too. And I have a whole goal setting method that I have in the book. And the reason I really developed it is because it's easy to actually say, here's what we have to do professionally, and then obviously for our family, but everything else usually falls off the plate. And we don't know how to really set expectations in any of those other areas. So if you don't know those things, everyone else is going to run your time. And I have learned to really master my time. And I think that is a part of, honestly, the skill I've built throughout my life that has made me efficient and honestly made me fulfilled. And that to me is a big part of it. I would actually, I always say people want to look at my accomplishments, but actually what I really hope you look at is someone who is fulfilled in their life. And that's really the end goal for all of this, is how do we use our time wisely so it's fulfilling, right? Not that it's just you've accomplished so many things in your life. Great. Like you can have, when you're on your deathbed, you can look back at your life. It's not about your accomplishments. It's about time well spent.
It's something that's difficult to remember when you are that young Bain consultant, though, right? Because you talk very poignantly about how you got your first negative review when your manager noticed that you decided to go to a dance performance instead of a client meeting. And I'm curious, for that 23-year-old who's probably right here, who's a consultant and whose time is controlled for them, what advice do you have for them? How do you think about staying strong?
Yeah, I mean, I went and found a career path that would work, right? So when I went to Warner after Bain, I think some people in my life thought it was probably pretty nuts because most people were going off to business school. But I wanted to solve for something I really loved in my life without going crazy, right? I didn't just quit and go and build a dance company. I didn't have the skills yet to do that. But I made sure I had some income coming in, which was really important. I kept sort of my responsibilities in check. And in the extra hours that I finally had, I was able to do what I loved, right? And I think it's about finding, like I said, and setting up your time and your environments to be able to do the things that you really want to. So if you're not in control of your time, that's fine to a point. And you need to know when you are going to switch that script for you and start charting your own journey. And honestly, I don't think anyone tells us that, right? I think we were told, go to a good college. Okay, then go to a good career. Okay, then go back to and get another degree from a good college. But no one ever tells us anything outside of that, or the rest is just get married and have kids. And there are so many other paths to that. And no one's ever told us to look inward to say, wait, what's the path I want to take? And can I find someone? Obviously, it's great to have role models, right? And I always say, go and find role models that speak to your soul, right? Because those people will be able to lead you in a path that's your path instead of the path that society wants to put you on. And I think that's honestly one of the biggest things that, you know, if you're younger, what you have to do is think about and learn what you're good at, what inspires you during this time. I do think it's really important to get experience, to get real world experience and have those credentials on your resume. I was actually speaking to Bain earlier today, and there's no way that I probably would have been able to get to the place I got to today without having MIT and Bain on my resume, you know? So I'm unbelievably thankful for those times. But I also needed to get off at some point. And I actually remember the conversation with my mom, and my mom was the one who told me to quit. Here I was, this girl who had literally done everything in the world that my parents wanted me to. They were so proud of me. And it was really at a point where I think my parents were like, okay, like, how much are you gonna keep doing? Like, are you even happy doing this? And I was like, no, I'm not happy. And I can keep doing it because you've taught me how to succeed in my life. And you've taught me how to do well. But they really realized that it was about allowing me to fly in the way that I wanted to. And we all, you know, have to figure out a way to give ourselves that permission to do that in our lives.
The questions are flying in. So let's try to hit some of these up.
Oh, yeah.
From Monsi, how do you find mentors that you can be vulnerable with? Were they people you worked with? Were they people you formally reached out to?
A lot of times it would be, you know, I would meet one mentor, that mentor would introduce me to someone else, that would introduce me to someone else, would introduce me to an investor. I think we forget that there's a ricochet of networking effects that happen in our lives. I mean, Sheel, you sent me a cold email, right? And we had lunch, and then you put me in touch with Jeremy Levine, who literally was on the board of Yelp, which was just like the craziest meeting in my life to have at that point. And so you just never know how these moments ricochet in your life. And it was funny. I was at South by Southwest on Sunday, and some girl came up to me and she's like, how do I meet people? Like, I don't know where to meet mentors. And I'm like, look around, right? Like this.
You're talking to you right now.
Right. I'm like, and yeah, that too, but you're around so many people. Go up to them. And sometimes it's even finding a peer, right? Who can say, oh, well, actually, like, I'm talking to this person. I think they would be interested in what you're doing too. I can do an intro, right? Find a way to take introductions, find a way to then, you know, build good relationships, make an introduction to another person. Like I said, I met Ange through a mentor to a mentor introduction, right? It wasn't even a direct channel to Ange. So I think it's really about continuously putting yourself out there and finding people, once again, who feel that they are speaking to your soul and that you feel you can be honest with. And honestly, if you don't have anyone, like, go ask 5 friends, like email them being like, hey, here's what I want to work on. Do you know anyone who can help me with that? I guarantee that you will have one person reply to you and say, oh, actually, I do have somebody who can help you there.
Great advice. Next one, what advice do you have about making an effective pitch to a potential investor?
You know, I mean, there's basics to obviously how you do it. At the end of the day, I think the biggest thing is tell a good story. I mean, these guys see pitches all the time. Honestly, we should be asking Sheel this question, not me, because he's the one who literally looks at
the investor. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sheel, what's your answer to that?
I mean, find somebody who is really passionate and has lived the problem. I think it comes across when somebody has a why for what they're doing. And I have found in my investing career that the biggest companies in the world are created by entrepreneurs who are motivated by something other than money, because that's what it's going to take to run through walls, to hire people in really tough job markets, to find customers, you know, to do all the little things and the big things required to succeed. And I mean, Payal is, in my opinion, the quintessential example of that. But I think that's what we look for, that just authenticity. What do you think, Payal?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I'll be honest, when I first started, I pitched like a robot and a monkey, and I feel I didn't raise any capital because I went in with, you know, my suit thinking I needed to be prepared for every number they were going to throw at me. And I I don't know, I just didn't have any life to me. And then I flipped that. And I think when I really became authentic in the problem I wanted to solve and why, and it became so much more apparent to people why I was the person who was doing this, right? And like I said, that's when I would be like, come to my dance show, instead of sort of hiding that part of who I was. It just made sense to everyone to be like, wow, this is why, she's going to do this. And I completely agree with you. It's really all about this, to me, the story you tell.
Yeah, I mean, the most successful pitches I ever had, I mean, I didn't get past the second slide of the deck. It all just turned into a story and a conversation.
Right. And I, actually one of my favorite investor meetings was with Fritz, who ended up being the CEO of ClassPass. But when I met him, my tendency, especially from my Bain training, was to whip out my presentation slides. And he was like, I don't want to see any slides. Like, just talk to me and tell me what you want to build and why. And it took me a second to reframe myself because I was in shock. I'm like, wait, what do I do without the slides? But I realized that there was a story, right? And that's actually more important than anything that was on these slides. The slides didn't have to tell the story, I did.
And it's jarring because you're a performer. You're used to the rehearsal and doing the show, and you just had to figure out how to issue a new kind of performance.
Yeah, agreed. I actually talk about that, right, in the book, of how I had done well performing on stage. How do I turn, these investor meetings into something of a performance for me? So I knew I could bring the same type of heart and, and capabilities to it.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Right here.
Yeah, sorry. I'm over the book. Great read. We have a couple more questions before we wrap up. Some interesting ones. There was an article in the Atlantic some time ago that stated the notion of women having it all is a myth. And you are a mom, an entrepreneur, a dancer, an author. Some might say you have it all. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's hard for anyone to have it all at the same time. I think you have to prioritize what you want, and that's the way to have it all. It's not saying I want everything. It's about saying I want this, this, and this, and I'm going to go into it. And that's how you feel fulfilled. It's when you constantly feel that you can't do something, right? That's when you start feeling like you're not living up to your potential. So prioritize what living up to your own potential really is.
I want to push into it a little bit more, because I think it's really, you talk about prioritization in the book, and I think when someone sees dancer, author, entrepreneur, they're like, you are doing it all, but there's clearly things that you've said no to in pursuit of, say, writing a book over the last few months. Can you give us a taste of what that is? Something that was really difficult to prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, even, and this is why I do a quarterly goal setting method, because I like to say, okay, for these 3 months, I'm going hard at this. And then the next 3 months, I'm going to go hard at this. I mean, during the last 3 months with my book stuff, like I barely danced, I just couldn't fit it in, and it is what it is. And you just have to make a plan to make that happen and not feel bad about it. I knew that when this was over, I'll find the time again, but you just really make those trade-offs. And even honestly, it's been really busy with interviews and all of that. Like, I also had to talk to my husband to be like, can you feed our son dinner every night? Because I'm not going to be able to show up for that. And if I have time with him, I don't want to be feeding him. I want to play with him because I'm so busy, right? So it's about being really honest and communicating with the people around you what your priorities are, so you can do what you really want to do. I wanted to be around my son, but I wanted my time with him to not be trying to cook for him and doing all that stuff. I wanted it to be about playing with him and just spending quality time. So I think it's about focusing in on what is important to you. And those are sort of the trade-offs I think I've made throughout my entire life. I mean, one of my favorite ones is right when I met my husband. It was literally the month ClassPass was launching in its second city. I had just planned a huge dance show in the middle of New York City, and I met Nick, and we knew that we were probably going to get married, and he wanted me to meet his parents and his family. And I just remember being like, I cannot be Miss daughter-in-law right now, or Miss, cousin-in-law, any of that. I was just like, I have no time for this right now. And in my goal setting, I just was like, I'm going to focus on my work and dance show right now and spending time with him. And the next quarter, I will go on a family trip with him and focus on being there. And you know what the most important thing is? Being present when I'm there. And I think that's really what has helped me, is when I decide to do something, I'm going to be present in doing it. So everyone knows I'm actually there, versus sort of, when you do something over and over again, you're just kind of half there. You're not really apparent, and with whether it's family or a conversation you're having. I just refuse to have moments like that in my life. I'll cancel dinners if I know I'm preoccupied with a huge problem at work. I'm like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for the other person. And it's not worth it for me because I'm not going to be present and they're probably not going to get a good conversation out of me either. So it's really about knowing how you work and what you want out of your time.
It takes a lot of self-knowledge to be able to admit that and have good friends that can absorb you for that, right? And be willing to be canceled on because they know that this works for you.
I mean, I think you set that up in your life. Exactly. Like you said,
sure.
that's what you
it's
do.
an environment that you build. I think we have a final question coming from Sanjeev, who's going to join us on camera.
Hi, Tyle, Amira, and Sheel. What a wonderful conversation. Really enjoying this. In the spirit of respect, in the spirit of candor that is born out of tremendous respect, I'm going to ask you a somewhat provocative question, Payal, and then Sheel, a quick follow-up for you. What makes you a great boss? What makes you a bad one? You, Payal, specifically. And then Sheel, how do you spot a good boss to invest in or a bad boss not to invest in? And can a bad boss make a startup a unicorn, in which case does it even make a difference if you're good or bad as a boss?
I would say what makes me a good boss is my passion towards getting things done and just letting nothing stand in my way and allowing that same thing for other people and believing in them. I think that's really been the key of it. I would say that that's part of also probably what makes me a bad boss because I'm willing to break things and I can move really quickly sometimes and people are like, wait, what? Like you said this last week and now we're here. But I think that's just the way I like to move fast. And that's sort of, the way I operate. But like I said, it's a pro and a con.
And I would say, every good boss that I've seen is somebody who defers the credit and takes the blame, even if it's not for something that they had anything to do or any control over. And I think that's true whether you're a CEO to a manager to really anybody, in life. I found that the best bosses are always the ones who are happy to defer the credit.
And can a bad boss get a startup to be a unicorn?
Originally I would have said no. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it can stay a unicorn or if it can go beyond potentially unicorn. I think maybe through sheer will, it's possible, but I don't know. I mean, I think longevity it's very unlikely, right? Because I think it's going to come out. Nothing great is only great for a little bit, right? It's going to be great for a long time, and so eventually you have to be a great boss or you're going to get replaced.
The only thing I'll say on that is, in startup world, the only other lens I would have on, especially with unicorns, is I think the best thing you can build is something that is timeless and that as a leader, you can step away from and continues to exist, right? So looking at it less from a leadership perspective and more from what you create in the world, it's really creating something that you can truly, right? That is timeless and outlasts you. That's when you've built something truly magical in the world.
Yeah, and being a good boss and bad boss is really dependent on the time at which you're leading something. So you might be a great boss in the early pre-product market fit days, but once you're ready to scale, maybe you're not so good at it. And so it's like anything, it's dependent on the context.
Bill Gates is different than Satya Nadella, I guess. That doesn't mean one is good or one is bad necessarily.
Good point.
Yeah, I wonder how Satya would do running a pre-product market startup, pre-product market fit startup. You don't know. Maybe we'll have the chance to check it out someday. You might try.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay. So that was a great last question to close out on. I think before turning it over to Raka from Diaspora, any last thoughts, Payal, Sheel? This was so much fun. Thanks for this.
Thanks for having me. And especially I'll say thank you to the entire Diaspora team. I mean, I think it's so amazing, incredible what you guys are doing. Sheel actually told me about the organization, I think maybe 5-6 years ago. And I think it's incredible what you guys are doing. So thank you for having me.
Raka, take it away.
Yeah, hi. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. Just for the audience, I'm Raka. I work at Diaspora, and this is part of our new initiative called DiasporaNEXT, where we are trying to engage the younger generation of Indian Americans who are young professionals just starting out in their careers and, hoping to be as successful as our panelists here have become. And we want to host different events like this for that group so that they can get inspired, get their questions answered by people that they look up to, and also create a network amongst themselves, and they can help each other. And we really want to have a really interactive group created through this initiative. So thank you so much to Payal for joining us, to our members, Sheel and Amira, and also Sejal, who started us off earlier. We really appreciate it, and it was such a great conversation. Hope everyone has a lovely evening, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys. Thanks for